everybody, it's me, Shauna, back again, changing misconceptions about disability. Today we're talking about my disability, spinal muscular atrophy, so stay tuned. So we're talking about my disability, spinal muscular atrophy type 3. It is technically considered a rare disease. A rare disease means that it's less than 200,000 people in the US would have it. In this instance, SMA affects anywhere from 10 to 25,000 people in the United States, and it happens 1 in every 6 to 10,000 births. It's genetic, which means that it's on your chromosome. There is a faulty mutated SMN gene. It's also recessive, which means it's carried by both parents. About 1 in 50 are carrying this recessive gene. So in a room of 100 people, if the 2 people in the room who have the recessive gene got together, then you've increased your chances of having a child with SMA. It's progressive and degenerative, which means it will degenerate, get worse over time, progressing, and it's neurological. So people with my disorder go to a neurologist. There's 4 different types. They creatively called them type 1, 2, 3, and 4. Type 1, 2, 3. They creatively called them type 1, 2, 3, and 4, but they also have specific names. The names of the types are usually attributed to the scientists who worked on them or discovered them. And each of the 4 types are determined by the age of onset and the developmental milestone that you've reached when the symptoms start to show up. Let's get into each of them here. I'm going to read a little so that I don't get any of them wrong. Since I only have one type, I only know the most about one type, but I'm going to give you some generic overview about all of them. Let's talk about these 4. No, I'm itching. Let's talk about these 4 a little more. Also, for transparency, I should mention that there is a type 0, but it is very, very rare and very, very deadly. I tried to look up some statistics, but I couldn't find any on it. That's how rare it is. Type 1, Weirding-Hoffmann, the name of the scientist who discovered and researched on it, is also called floppy baby. It is the most prevalent type of SMA. 60% of people with SMA have type 1. It also is the most severe and shows up the earliest. It's usually diagnosed within the first 6 months, and it is also the most fatal. It's the most common cause of death to children under the age of 2. Yes, more than SIDS. Type 2 is called Dubowitz, and it is usually diagnosed between 6 months and 2 years old. They have delayed milestones, usually reaching the ability to sit independently at some point. They may then lose it, and then they're still considered a type 2 because that was the milestone they could reach. They have an average lifespan, and they can live a long, happy life. The 3rd type is Kugelberg-Wieslander. It is usually diagnosed somewhere between 18 months and 3 years, and that's what I have, type 3, which means that the milestone they could reach was walking at some point. I actually still walk. I use my chair primarily outside the house because I get tired or I could trip and fall, but I still do walk around inside the house. Therefore, I have an average lifespan and I can clearly live a long and happy, successful, productive life. And then the last type is type 4, which is pretty unusual. Less than 1% have this, and it's called adult onset, which means you aren't presenting any symptoms until 18 to 35 years of age. Now let's talk about diagnosis and prognosis. I had a biopsy when I was a kid. That was in the stone age of medicine because nowadays they have discovered which chromosome it's on. They can do it through a blood test, so you can normally get this test done pretty uninvasively. Additionally, parents can be genetically tested to see if they're carrying the gene in order to know if they even have the chance of producing a child with SMA. Other diagnostic tests that are performed is a terrible, terrible, horrible, awful, downright miserable test called a nerve conduction and an EMG, electromyogram. The nerve conduction is them literally shocking a nerve, and an EMG is them sending an electrical pulse, basically electrocuting you, in your muscle to test responsivity and how dead is the muscle and things like that. It's terrible. Did I mention it's terrible? They hurt like hell, and I do not encourage anyone to do it. Even now as an adult, I tell my doctors, like, is this necessary? What's it gonna do? What's it gonna tell us? I get very picky. For 30 years, I insisted I wasn't having them. And then in order to get diagnosed, re-diagnosed, because my doctor didn't believe me, and he didn't believe my genetic test that came back, he just thought I was too strong to have what I have. So he made me do the whole gambit of tests, and it sucked. Every bit as bad as I remember it from when I was a kid. So my advice to parents is, don't electrocute your kids. Feels like I shouldn't have to say that. And yet doctors will insist you have to, for their morbid curiosity. Treatment. Oh, treatment is a whole can of worms. Up until December 23rd of 2016, there was no treatment. There were procedures that would help extend life or the quality of life. Many of the type 1s and type 2s have had spinal fusion surgery. Some of them have feeding tubes, some of them do suction. There's many different aspects of maintaining yourself depending on the severity of the type that you have. I would advise people to do more research about the specifics of each type. This is a broad overview of treatment. There's really no treatment to make your spinal muscular atrophy go away or be better. What you're treating are the secondary symptoms. Like, I go to a chiropractor because my back is getting crunched because my muscles are not strong enough to keep my spine up, and thus I get compacted. So I go to the chiropractor because of the SMA. We're not treating the SMA, we're just treating my back. Same thing with people who have breathing problems or mucus problems. You're not treating the SMA, you're just treating the side effect. However, as I mentioned, December 23rd of 2016 is a big deal day because it was the day that the very first treatment for SMA was approved by the FDA. It is called Spinraza. If you have any cause to do any research about SMA, you will see Spinraza. The treatment is not a cure, just get that out of your head. The treatment is intended to halt the progression of the disorder. So when you start taking it, in theory, that is the worst you will ever be for your atrophy, for your progression of atrophying. Obviously, I didn't start taking it till I was very old. I was already atrophying. The good news is that when they start doing this right at birth with newborn babies, those babies are achieving milestones they would have never achieved without the treatment. So it's very good for the disorder as a whole. However, it is administered as an injection in your spine. Wah, wah. But you only have to have your injection every 4 months. It sucks. Does not feel good at all. Yes, you're given a local. Children, I believe, are anesthetized. Some people have had a port put in if they've got spinal fusion and then getting to the spine is a problem. I would say go do some research about Spinraza if you're curious or this applies to you. Since December 23rd, a couple of more drugs have been approved. That is purported to do the same thing as Spinraza in terms of halting the progression. This time, you take it orally every day. Oh, and did I mention the cost of these drugs? Pfft. Sit down. If you're not already sitting down, sit down. My Spinraza injections were costing $125,000 per dose, which is a vial. That doesn't even include all of the cost of performing the procedure. Luckily, my doctor used to just do it in his office, just boink. But when I switched to a different provider, they made me go through IR, which is interventional radiology, where they put you on a table that does all this mechanical stuff, and there's a technician operating that machine. He's got to get paid. The machine's got to be paid for. And then they're x-raying you, so hello, lead vests, and everybody needs protection, in order to thread the needle in carefully. And yeah, overkill for me. For people with complicated spine malformations or spinal rods and spinal fusions, obviously you need the equipment in order to see what you're doing. For me, I just bend forward, create an arch in my back, and create spaces, and he would do it by ultrasound. I mean, honestly, I hated getting the injections, but he was so good at it. There are a couple of other drugs that are intended for children only, and there are also things that are in development, that are in trial phases. Again, I would say, if you're curious or this applies to you, go do more research. If you've gotten value out of this, please hit the like button, the subscribe, maybe share this with somebody. You could even visit the Patreon and support more content like this. If you have any questions, please put them down below. I'll do my best to answer them. Again, I have type 3, so it's easiest for me to give personal life experience and firsthand knowledge for type 3, but I have plenty of SMA friends that I can also get some information from.